You can have these moments of clarity, and you're like, okay, I'm going to do this. We're going to heal up, and we're going to be fine. But reality sets in sometimes, and it's like, okay, well, this is going to be a hard fight. So this platoon, when we formed up, there's always new guys. So the new guys in that platoon was myself and Elliot. But with that, you kind of have your own little natural bond. We had like a mutual respect. Talk about love. We had this brotherhood love. So I went through my recovery here in San Diego, and this is post-surgery. This was the last surgery I had here. And my daughter, she was about 2.5 at the time. So I'd go into the bathroom, and my daughter would steal my wheelchair. She thought the wheelchair was great. But this is us just sharing ice cream. My family is definitely a huge contributor to the healing process. That's where we are. And this is all the beginning of recovery. This was just kicking it off. This is scratching the surface, but important first steps. I grew up in a small town in Arkansas. I had heard about the SEALs in Vietnam, and I read a book called Brave Men, Dark Waters, and that got me really interested in it. I actually joined the Navy in September of 1995, and I did a few years as a Seabee doing construction, and then from there I was able to find my way to BUDS and became a SEAL. So in 2004, I got to my first SEAL team. The next deployment was for the Battle of Ramadi, and that's where the movie Warfare kind of was filmed regarding that one battle. November 19th, 2006 is when it was a day that was not different than many other days in the scheme of we were just out on another mission, and we've done these missions tons of times. We had done a direct action raid that night, and then we had moved into an overwatch position, and that's where you see in the movie Warfare, we were doing an overwatch position. The insurgents knew where we were, or they were trying to figure out exactly where we were, and then they were formulating their own battle plan to come and attack us. So the first thing we had was a grenade come through a loophole. Loopholes are holes that we blow in walls so we could shoot through them. A bad guy was able to get a grenade through the loophole into our house. Elliot was in the room. Grenade went off. Only one person got hurt, was Elliot, and it was just a small piece of frag in his arm. So we were able to get him out. Started patching him up and getting him ready to be medevaced. So we realized we needed to get him out of there, but everything else was under control at that point. That was one of our contingencies. No big deal. We worked through the contingency, and that's where we got set up, called in some Bradleys to leave, but then the bad guys got a vote in that when we got out on the street. I think one of our Iraqi scouts has either stepped on an IED or it was command detonated from across the street. Either way, the major blast came in, and that's when Elliot and I were both wounded. Immediately after the blast goes off, it was about noon, so it was really bright, and but with all the dust and then the explosive, the smoke from the blast, it was super dark at my level, but I could see this. I could see the sun, and so my immediate thought was I had pain from the knees down. And my immediate thought was my legs were gone. I just kind of laid back and tried to lift my legs into the sky because I wanted to get the light on my legs to see what was going on. And what I could see was my pants just kind of come up and fell. So I thought, well, my feet are gone. So I was convinced at that point my feet were gone. So I rolled over on my stomach and I started trying to crawl. And with the Rhodesian on, I was making very little progress because those seconds are going by and no one's there because you're like, where's everybody at? But time starts to slow down, and that's when Clint comes out, and I see Ray run by. He goes and went and got Elliot, and then Clint come out and grabbed me. And Ray wasn't a medic, he was a comms guy, but and absolutely saved our lives. Talk about this love of brotherhood and love of your teammates. I just knew at that second I'm looking at Ray, and I just know that there's no way he would let me die. there's no way. He would die before I would die. And Ray was very calm. And, at one point, Ray says, "Hey, you're fine. You're fine." And I told him, "Say, yeah, my feet are gone." And Ray says, "No, he looked down. He says, "No, they're there. They're just in the wrong place." It's weird to say that, but there's humor. You've got to find humor in dark times. And we had those little bits of humor, and that made me calmer myself. And I remember a doctor telling me early on, he says, "Well, it's going to be a really hard road to recover if you choose to take it." And I'm like, well, it's the other road. The recovery process was long, but I would say rewarding, at the end. Right around my 25-year mark, I decided it's time to retire. So, which put me just over 26 years. And I was down in PB walking, and I ran into Mark. He was on the boardwalk. So Mark Mason was a SEAL that I'd served with in the SEAL teams, and he started just, Mark lights up, and he's just, "This is what SHIELD is, and you got to come work there." But like I said earlier, I wasn't ready to. I was more focused on hanging the uniform up and being fulfilled and just retiring. And I thought, well, that sense of service is complete. But within a very short amount of time, I realized I had a void, and it was the service, it was the giving back. And then I did a little research on SHIELD, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sounds great. The mission of the Nova 1 and Nova 2, and it was to go out and be a post-breach product to show an assault force what was going on behind the doors and potentially save their lives. And I saw the value in that. And that is really easy for somebody like me to get behind, because I could see the value, immediate value. It bridged that gap from service in the military to service in the civilian world. Service doesn't end, with taking uniform off. You transition to a different battlefield, because we were still helping military operations. We're still helping save service members' lives. It wasn't the personal medals or the rank. It was the person beside you. It was Elliot, Ray. You're putting something bigger than you first. Warfare is ugly. I think it's never going to be not ugly. And we talked earlier, I think that with AI and robots and all these other ways of fighting, it still gets back eventually to the trenches, the house to house. That's the ugly part of warfare. But the more tools that we have, and the tools that SHIELD provides, it does buy another day that we can change the battlefield to actually stop conflict or prevent conflict from actually happening.